Hey, ladies, welcome to Truth Be Told, episode 5. A podcast about women for women that dispels myths, brings voices from the silence, refuels the emptiness so we are not only heard but we are impactful. I am Michelle Lorraine, your host. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a very impactful evening and segment tonight. I hope that you will hear our heart as we talk about this topic. And those who have been hurt or having friends that have been hurt, we're here to just have a conversation about traumatic or trauma and transition. Now, we're going to be covering 4 tips of how to transition out of trauma, and we'll be speaking the truth from what we have gone through personally, and to see how we can just arise above our situation. Please feel free, as always I tell you, feel free to share the video, like and follow, and stay tuned to the end of the program today because there is a special announcement. So again, stay tuned until the end of the program. There is a special announcement. As always, again, remember you can comment and ask questions throughout the program. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to welcome 2 strong and powerful women to Truth Be Told, Jessica Grant and Cheyanne Ratnum. Hey, ladies.
Hey.
Okay, thank you for joining us on Truth Be Told. I am so excited. I got to talk to both of you a few times. Cheyanne, I've known you for some years. And Jessica, I've just met you, but you're an amazing woman, very powerful. I'm just amazed by both of you and what you're doing and what you've accomplished in your life and everything that you've been through. It's just powerful, just hearing your stories and your own testimonies of what life has brought you to. So, first of all, Jessica, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Cheyanne, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. I always love to be able to hold space and to be in spaces like this when we talk about trauma and we talk about healing. So, thank you, first of all, for this. Second, so a little bit about myself. Well, you know my name, Jessica. Well, Jessica Robinson Grant. I've been married for almost 4 years, but I haven't changed my name yet. I will so soon. I run a nonprofit organization called 365 Ministries.
Yes.
I have a mentorship program called My Sister's Keeper. These are all Black led, Black serving organizations. And I have a podcast called She Speaks Truth.
Yeah.
Um, what else is about myself? I think those are the most pertinent things right now.
Okay,
So
awesome.
that's good. Yeah.
All right, Cheyenne.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cheyanne Ratnum. I'm very happy to be here on today's segment with Michelle and Jessica. A little bit about me is that I actually grew up in the child welfare system, and so I have a lot of systemic experiences. And biologically, I'm Tamil, Elam Tamil, but my upbringing was actually through a lot of Indo and Afro-Caribbean people. And so my upbringing is very mixed, and usually people kind of get confused when they meet me. But I mean, I think that my experiences and my outlook on life and where I am and where I was definitely will add some nuances to today's segment in terms of trauma and transition. And I'm also the executive director, and actually we just got incorporated 2 weeks ago of the
Ah.
Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition as well.
Okay, that's awesome. Both of you guys are doing and accomplishing great things, and I really appreciate you taking time out with us this evening. And what led you, Jessica, to doing your job or in this area of social work and even with the 365 ministries that you do? What led you to this area?
So I have an undergrad in sociology, and so one day I was in my sociology of crime class, and they were talking about deviant youth. But the
Hmm.
youth they were describing, I was like, that's me. That's my brother. That's the youth that they were aiming to describe. And something leaped on the inside of me. I was like, I want to do my master's in social work. Because after my sociology degree, I was like, I'm not too sure where I'm going to go after this. And then I decided to move on to that. But my passion really lies, and this has been since I was 18, in community and helping the Black community. Specifically, that's been where my work has been, where my work is currently, and that's where my roots are. So what led me to that was my love for community. But over the past, I wouldn't say couple years, over the past, I want to say 6 years, I've really found strength in my story, as we talk about trauma in transition, and just the aspect of like intergenerational traumas and how that has affected the Black community, as to how now that plays into systemic issues and so forth. So that's where I've kind of like, gone through a few weaves and so forth.
Yeah.
In terms of with 365 Ministries, I have a real heart to see church and community collaborate.
Wow.
And so I was like, I have to do something. Well, I've been doing this now for 7 years. And before that, it really started as women praying. And then it evolved over the years. As I evolved, it evolved. And, or evolves rather. And there's so many other things that come out of it. So it's really just my heart for community. And also, right now, God has just been kind of just adding layers to that, as I talked about with like the traumas that I've been through, and how I have a saying that says, healed people heal people. We talk about hurt people, but healed people heal people. And so I just really want to see healing in my community in all aspects.
Okay, awesome. That's amazing. And Cheyanne, what led you to do what you're doing right now as well?
Yeah, so I think for me, definitely a lot of adversities that I experienced in life. And so, the earliest memory that I have of adversity, which I know many of our viewers will probably experience, is shadism. And so I was very outcasted in my own biological community because I was darker than the rest of my family, but also the community. And so I remember, I think I spoke to you about this, Michelle, before, but I remember I used to do classical Indian dancing, and they put me in the back at events because I was darker, and they put the light-skinned girls in the front. So from a very, very young age, I really I was aware that I was different. I was aware that I didn't have as much privilege as other people. And then when I was 8 years old, and just a content advisory as well for people watching, what I'm about to say might trigger people. And so I really hope that you have an ally that you can message afterwards or during this process. So when I was 8 years old, I also survived sexual abuse, pedophilia. And then, that led to problems at home, which then led to me running away often. The first time that I had suicidality was actually in grade 5. And so I struggled with my mental health because of my earlier experiences. And grade 5 is very young too. You're not an adult. And so the lesson is that mental health is not just an adult thing. Mental health is a children's thing as well. And it starts way younger than grade 5 as well. And then I experienced homelessness. And then I was raised by the Guyanese community. And then I entered the child welfare system. And then through the child welfare system, I found my mom who's Jamaican. I found a dad figure who's Jewish, and all these different, support systems came to me. But most of my experiences really did develop my interest in getting into social work and social service work. And so I do have a diploma in social service work from Centennial College, and I do have a bachelor's and master's degrees of social work from York University. And so creating and, nurturing a nonprofit and something that is lived expert led was very important to me, because oftentimes it's people without lived experiences who are swooping into communities and talking about healing. And it's like, it should come from within communities too. And so a lot of my earlier experiences definitely played a role in where I am today. And I'm very proud of myself, and I'm very proud of my peers and people that I don't know, because we're all on a journey of healing.
That's right. Thank you both for that. It's touching to hear the stories of pain, especially when it happens as a youth. But it's something that happens in people's lives, no matter what age they are. How would you describe to someone what a traumatic experience is? Because some people feel that it is a war, experiencing war, or a rape situation. Are those the only type of traumatic experience a person can have, how would you describe a traumatic experience to someone? Either one of you can answer that question.
Jessica, do you mind if I go? Or
Go.
So I think trauma, we should definitely, so traumatic events are, shocking events or events that make you frightened or sad or disrupt your sense of safety. And so that could be anything. We cannot say that one traumatic event is more traumatic than another event, because that is from that perspective should be from the subject, the person who's actually experiencing it. And so for me, trauma is any sort of loss or grief that a person has experienced. And sometimes the most traumatic thing that may be something that like people have experienced is, let's say, for example, there's a young person and this person was given a teddy bear. Okay. And this teddy bear meant the world to them. And then one day that teddy bear got lost. And for them, that was so traumatic because they had a sense of attachment to that teddy bear. And that trauma stayed with them for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
I've gone through sexual abuse, I have gone through whatever, but I can't say that that trauma was less than mine, because that impact might be the same thing as the impact that I'm going through in terms of mental health discrepancies, in terms of my healing process, in terms of really processing what really went on and why I'm attached to certain things and not attached to certain things as well.
Right.
I guess just to add on to that, that was perfect. I like what you talked about with the teddy bear and the teddy bear being taken. It's almost like anything that leaves almost like a stain in your soul of some sort. You know what I mean? Because now, depending on how that teddy bear was taken, that may result in that youth or that child not trusting or being afraid of different things. And then there's the aspect also of compounded trauma or cumulative trauma. So it's like you've experienced historical trauma or interpersonal trauma or external trauma. So there's different, I don't want to say layers, but different aspects of trauma where you are now experiencing cumulative or compounded trauma. So there's that aspect as well that we can add in.
Right. And it's true, because as a youth or as a child, certain things play in your mind. I'm going to give an example of my daughter, my youngest daughter. When I was in a head-on collision some years ago, she was still a toddler at the time. And when we got in the car accident, she had McDonald's and she had the sauce, and the sauce just hit her all over. And for some reason now, she just does not like sauce. Like, she doesn't like, the sauce on her food. She doesn't like sauce on her. So something stays in your mind when you have an experience that you don't forget it. And just because it may seem like it's just sauce. No, it's something that stays in her mind. So if I cook food and I make sauce on it, she's like, I don't like the sauce. I don't like the sauce. It doesn't make sense for you to do something that will bring back a bad memory for someone if it impacts them. And as simple as it may seem, as we say, it's a simple thing. No, it's something that has impacted a person. So it's very true. So do you feel... Yeah, go ahead.
So in terms of trauma as well, it's not just the personal traumatic experiences that you've experienced. There's also something like vicarious trauma. And so for helpers and people who are listening to people's truths and realities when they're processing outwardly to you, oftentimes, and I shouldn't say oftentimes, but sometimes what happens is that the other person's trauma, even though you haven't directly experienced it, you tend to feel like you have, because it's almost like it's vicariously coming through you. That's why we call it vicarious trauma. And so one of the things about trauma, whether it's vicarious trauma or it's trauma that you've witnessed, that you bared witness to, or that you've experienced yourself, is that whatever you're doing, whether it's processing that trauma, whether it's trying to figure out if it's trauma or not, whether you're trying to figure out someone else's story and narrative, it's so important to practice ongoing self-care throughout the entire process. And so even with this segment today, I think that if anybody is triggered, if anybody is feeling uncomfortable with some of the things, please do, like I said at the beginning, if you have an ally or someone you really trust, just give them a message or, talk to them afterwards, because part of this segment is also talking about self-care as well, because trauma and self-care are so interconnected.
Okay, great. We do have a...
I would just like to add that there are also links to helplines and some information that we have added into the comment section. So if anyone does feel like they need to reach out to someone, we have provided some links and some numbers you can call and reach out to.
Okay, good. So, do you feel that everyone has had a traumatic experience? Is that something that is possible, but maybe they didn't even realize that maybe their actions is the result of a traumatic experience, but they didn't know? And so, some of the things that we're seeing is a representation of it. Is that possible? Jessica or Cheyanne? Yeah?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to trauma and traumatic events, I think that everybody, at least once in their lifespan does experience something, whether they recognize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
However, oftentimes, so sometimes what happens when we experience a traumatic event is that we compartmentalize and we put it away.
Mm.
We don't want to think about it. We don't want to talk about it. We actually don't remember it. We just act out a little bit, right? A lot of people, exactly. A lot of people's coping strategy is to forget or not think about it.
Yeah.
And so part of that is also, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but just to briefly say, part of this is post-traumatic stress disorder as well. So later in life, let's say 30 years from now, you're sitting down, and let's use your youngest daughter's example, right? Let's say that after the accident happened, she didn't really think too much about the sauce, but then 30 years from now, something triggered it. And then all of a sudden, your compartmentalized memories start coming back. And then you realize, oh my gosh, like, whoa. And you might not actually put post-traumatic stress disorder or trauma as a label, because you have to remember that mental health and mental health systems are westernized social constructions.
Yes.
And so this is North American, European, where my parents come from. I remember, I don't remember when exactly the tsunami happened, but there was a tsunami. I'm pretty sure everyone remembers there was a huge tsunami in the Indian Ocean. And so a lot of people, died. A lot of infrastructures were, destruction happened. But then westernized people, health supports, went to the Indian Ocean geographic area and said, hey, you have mental health issues, you have PTSD, but we didn't have that language. We didn't have that language at all. And so when we're talking about trauma, PTSD, etc., it's also important to kind of explain it without those terms because it's so westernized. And, part of, our cultures in general in terms of BIPOC people, so Black, Indigenous, and persons of color, and I don't want to lump everyone together, but just to generally say, is that a lot of times our cultures see mental health as a taboo. And we just say, oh, that person's crazy, don't talk to them. Or I remember my biological mom, I remember she's like, why are you going to social work? They're going to, people are crazy. They're going to make you crazy. That's that mentality, right? And so it's about understanding your culture. It's about understanding how to engage with different people who may not understand westernized philosophies of mental health and, the mental health systems. But it's important to kind of explain to them that, hey, maybe this is something that's happening, and try to utilize language that they may be utilizing, but don't right away say, oh, this is PTSD.
Right. That's true.
I think so. My view is in addition to what some points that Cheyanne pointed out, and I guess this lies in my work of working with the Black community and working with people of color. And Cheyanne, tell me if I'm going out on a limb when I say this. Please feel free to correct me. But I feel like almost if you're a person of color, you've kind of almost have experienced trauma, because trauma is historical. Right? It's things that are in systems and things like that, right? So, for example, as a Black person, I've most definitely, whether or not it's intergenerational, historical, external, interpersonal, I've definitely experienced some type of trauma. So as I think what you said, Michelle, was key in that people may have experienced trauma, but they don't know that they've experienced trauma.
Right. So elaborate on that point a little bit more, Jessica. You said, it's something historical, like, what do you mean by that? Elaborate on that part a little bit more.
No problem. It's funny because I just did a live on this actually like last week.
Okay.
So I wanted to, I guess, let's use an example of racial trauma. let's just use that because given the context that we're currently living in, whether or not you have experienced it interpersonally. So whether or not there was a white person that called me the N word or said something or expressed some type of microaggression or whatever, or whether or not it's the system. So we look at our Canadian society, it's built on structures of racism. You know what I mean? We look at our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, we see that. So because of the system and how it's been built, and even when you look at historical trauma, when you look at, again, I'm contextualizing it within the Black community because I can speak from that experience. History of trauma, like it's historically built in our system. It's historically how we've been positioned and shaped in the world. And so I think historical trauma can also be kind of like interwoven with intergenerational trauma. And something that I'm looking into, which is crazy, is the epigenetics. I'm not saying that right because I'm not a nurse or I'm not a med student.
You did that correct. Yes, that was right.
Of trauma, which is crazy. It's like it's in your great grandparents' DNA. So it's like almost inevitably in your DNA. You know what I mean? So I look at some of the experiences of my mom where she experienced domestic abuse while she was pregnant with me. So some of the things that I'm experiencing and, you know, some of the abuse that I went through was a result of what she's gone through. So there's how that level of now intergenerational and historical trauma comes about.
I think also just to add on to what Jessica was saying as well is part of intergenerational trauma is not just talking about the current context of what someone is experiencing, but definitely understanding, as Jessica was saying as well, to look at the historical context of structured systems. And so we know that much of the globe is influenced by white supremacist systems and white privilege. And so what does that mean for persons who are quote unquote racialized? And I say quote unquote because white people it's a race too. So I don't know why all are racialized too. But just for this context, the racialized people, we are definitely impacted by white supremacy, by white privilege, because the systems are catered to privilegize people who look like white people or who are white people. And the rest of people, there's also hierarchy. You know, my people, we're Tamil, and so I'm Dravidian in terms of ancestral roots. And so if you look at history, my history is actually erased by the Indian people because they don't like the idea of being connected to blackness in general. But that's part of the anti-blackness interwoven into all of our systems. Woven into all of our systems. And so that's why even in the current context of talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter, for example, I know we don't want to get into that too much, but Black Lives Matter, talking about anti-blackness, talking about structural and institutional racism, talking about all these things, it's so important to know the historical context of peoples that they come from so that you understand what types of privilege you have over other people, but also what privileges you don't have so that you can meaningfully provide allyship and stand with people instead of thinking you know everything or thinking that you understand something without the actual historical context. If you don't understand history, you don't understand the current either.
It's very important to understand history, not only with what you're saying in regards to racism, but also with people within your family to understand what has happened to people. So back to even the PDS, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder, sorry. I look at myself, for example. I remember when I had my daughter, and this is when 9/11 happened, and I saw it on TV. I literally saw the plane hit the second building. And I remember that night as clear as day, hearing the airplane flying over, like, because there was still airplanes flying. And for me, it just developed this fear of flying. I mean, when I plan to go on a trip, I literally get sick to my stomach. You can ask my kids. I get sick to my stomach. I want to go to Jamaica. I want to go wherever, but it's a task to get there. So I had to talk myself out of the fear because of what I saw and still be able to push myself to still go. So I would have to think of different ways my daughters would, okay, we'll watch a movie, and if I can watch the movie the whole time, or if I can find some way to fall asleep for the whole trip, then I'm okay. But it's something that we really need to recognize, that things stay in our mind and then it impacts our action. So right now I want to ask you, can someone truly overcome a traumatic experience, like the emotional impact, in your personal opinion? Can someone fully overcome a traumatic experience?
I think so. I definitely think you can. I think it's a journey, and even just with my work now on soul care, I'm always saying that healing is a journey, it is not a destination.
Mm,
So, if we're saying, can somebody overcome it? Yes, but it's not linear. It's not saying do this, then this, then this, then this. If you go to therapy, then this will happen. If you do this, then this will happen. It's linear, because people are going to find healing in various different ways and so forth. And it's interesting narrative, because it's like, even if you, as you reflect, you may be triggered once again on what has happened. But I truly believe, and I think because I am a woman of faith, I am a Christian, so I do believe that by the blood of the lamb we overcome, right? And
that's
so I
right.
do believe that we definitely can overcome and move on. I don't want to use the word move on, but reconcile. That's the word I'm going to use. We can reconcile with what has happened. One of the ways that I've been able to, and I use this as an example, so I didn't share this earlier, but one of my experiences is being abused as a child. And I'm 30, and that was happening between I was 5 and I was 9. And I'm still working through that.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that was working through, or still working through, is forgiveness of my father. But working with a therapist has really helped me to make
Mm-hmm.
peace with that. I can look at my dad on Sunday and say Happy Father's Day. You know what I mean? Do
Right.
certain things still spill and come to the surface?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, but not as bad as before. So
Right.
I do believe that there are elements that you can overcome, because I feel like if we tell people you will never overcome, or you will
Mm.
never get through this, then why am I working through this? Then why don't I just live and just be? I think it's that Dr. Vanderkopf. He talks about, so this, he has a book called The Body Keeps Score. If anybody wants a book on trauma, he talks about post traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
So there is life after trauma. And
Right.
even as we talk about this trauma in transition, I feel like I am right now in a space of post traumatic growth. You know
Right.
what I mean? So there is life after
I,
trauma.
I like that. Post
Yeah. So to
traumatic. Yeah.
so to make a
Yeah.
long story short, you definitely can. I think you definitely can overcome. It will be a process. It will not be linear, and it will be a journey, but you will overcome.
Okay, and we have a comment from Facebook. I just want to interject that, and then Cheyenne will come to you as well. Okay? Don't forget your thoughts, Cheyenne.
So I'm gonna just it's from Ari. She was asking, so in the incident with the sauce, and the child being afraid of sauce or not wanting sauce, and then now as an adult still not wanting the sauce, how can they overcome that if they wanted to? So how can you move from, I guess, experiencing something and now being afraid of something due to trauma and now moving past that?
Okay. Do one of you ladies want to answer that question?
I don't mind taking a stab at it, so you
Okay, go
don't forget
ahead.
your thoughts, Cheyenne.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of overcoming that, as I've said, it's a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Some ways that I've worked to overcome my trauma. I'm learning to use new language as well. I don't like to use the word my trauma. I don't like to own
Own
it in
it.
that way
Yeah, don't
anymore.
own it.
But ways in which you can overcome it, and this has been for me very helpful, is going to see a therapist, because
Mm-hmm.
trauma has a psychological impact on you. And one of the mistakes that I made is, because I'm a social worker, I would try to social work myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's the truth. I know this technique. I know talk therapy. Can I talk to myself? No. But I know talk therapy. I know cognitive behavior. I know all this stuff. So I'm going to figure it out. but being able to talk to someone and
Yeah.
for them to help me to decipher what is going through my brain, because
Mm-hmm.
as Cheyanne said, trauma is very compartmentalized. Like it's a very, it could be a very messy web, but somebody being able to help you to talk about it, be like, why do you think sauce triggers you?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give an example of this. So when I had I think my third mental breakdown, um, and I realized I need therapy. Like something is going on. And when I connected with my therapist, she said to me, what you need is inner child healing.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is something as small as the leaves changing the season triggers you. So
Mm-hmm.
around this time of the year, you're not your best. So for me, around September to about October, November, I'm not the greatest. And then from February to about March, I'm not the greatest. Something happened there. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're digging deep now to find what
Finding
happened.
it out.
So I think it's there's merit to working with somebody that can help you to decipher through those thoughts and
Mm-hmm.
to get to the root of what happened and uproot that. So I hope
Yeah.
that was a helpful
Thank you.
response.
Yeah. Thank you, Jessica. And Cheyenne, do you remember your point?
Yes. So I just wanted to add on to what Jessica was saying. Jessica was saying in terms of
It's okay, you can call me Jess.
sorry, in terms of what she was talking about, and I do agree with everything that she said. But I also wanted to say at the same time, it's like there's this rhetoric that we are all normalizing in terms of overcoming, in terms of healing, and I like to challenge that a little bit. I like to say that we need to also normalize just mental health spectrum on that spectrum and just say that it's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you're actually not broken. You're not damaged.
Right.
You're not. You're a whole person.
Mhm.
Like, you need to figure out what's going on,
Yeah.
and that will be a healing journey. But that doesn't mean that you're gonna fully overcome something because you're always growing. You're all like, I was not the same person I was when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
I was
Right.
not the same person I was when I was 12 years old. I was not the same person I am today when I was 25 years old, right? We're constantly evolving. And so we're never going to go back to that person's mindset that we were in before.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this talk about overcoming kind of reminds me of resiliency talk. And resiliency, by definition, means that you're going to spring back to your original form.
Yeah.
And that is not true. I don't talk about resiliency anymore because I've grown now from that. I've
Yeah.
moved beyond. But now I talk about malleability and adaptability. And so what does that mean? And what are some of the natural supports that you have that you can access? Because for me, I didn't have like my first counseling session until I think I was like 15 when I came into the child welfare system. And the counselor themselves said, you don't need counseling. It's your mother. So it was like, so it's like for me, my healing process was an actual introspective journey through myself, my own reflection, self-reflection.
Right.
And that really helped me ground myself, but that's not for everybody. For another person, like for example, Jess, as she was saying, for her therapist, like actually accessing a therapist and having an engagement with a therapist was very helpful. And in my lifetime, I'll probably go back to a therapist as well.
Right.
But it's never going to look the same way every time you go through something.
Yeah.
Right? And it's okay not to talk about it for a little bit either.
Yeah.
Never force anyone to
Yeah.
tell your story.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing that you can do because you're going to re-traumatize that person. I'm giving you the finger. You're going to
No, it's so true.
It's true. It's true.
It's so true.
So
encourage, like, these are some options that you have. This is what I do. You can try it, but never force someone's story unless they want to tell you their story themselves.
that's
really
true.
good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I'm watching the time because because there's so much information, and I want to
Hold
make
on,
sure.
Can I make one point?
Go
Can I-
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
won't be long. I
Okay.
promise.
Okay. Go ahead.
So it's funny because I was actually thinking about resilience when we talked about that. And I actually made a post today on Facebook about resilience. And I was talking about unhealthy resilience and the fact that unhealthy resilience merely festers unhealed wounds, masking them as strength and the ability to overcome.
Right.
So I really like what you talk about with malleability and adaptability. So being able to use those things as coping mechanisms.
Good.
High
Good.
functioning, sorry, one more thing. High functioning people, oftentimes that's a coping mechanism. For me, since I was little, doing everything and excelling at everything was my coping mechanism because it made me forget about my problems. And
Yeah.
that's not something that is rare for high functioning or excelling people. Something that is very, very common. And so if you see someone out there who's always smiling, who's always doing this and that, and they're a leader, they're leadership roles and whatever, know that everybody has a story. And sometimes that excelling reality is part of their coping mechanism of overcoming or processing trauma and lived expertise.
Okay, good. So I'm going to put out there what are some of the signs, and I'm just going to list a few of them, and then we're going to go into the 4 tips, because I want to make sure I get that out before we wrap up the show or the program. So what are some of the signs? Re-experiencing the traumatic event through memory. So you'll know if you are experiencing trauma or reflecting on trauma by re-experiencing the traumatic event through memories. If you are avoiding or trying to shy away or numbing the thoughts of what has happened to you, so you're just trying to avoid anything that relates to the trauma. Okay. Number 3, there's the hyperarousal, so sleeping problems, irritability, and always on red alert, like, oh my gosh, I got to be on top of this, on top of that. Like, you're just on high alert for everything. And then the last one I'm going to mention is negative thoughts and mood changes. So having the negative thoughts and 1 minute you're extremely happy, next minute you're really down, those are some signs of having the post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you want to add something to it? But I'm just saying, just add a point, because then we're going to move on.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that trauma, and I think Jess can add on to this after as well, because I think we both experienced this. Trauma manifests physiologically, and so that's TMS. I forget what the abbreviation expands to at this current moment, because I'm right now. But TMS is very important because, as Jess was saying earlier about the book, the body keeps a score. It is so true. It's 100%. Because for me, I have chronic leg pain whenever I'm triggered by something. I'm highly stressed out. I get really groggy, and my digestive system really starts to fumble itself. So sometimes I can't digest gluten, not because I'm celiac, but when I'm really, really stressed out, I cannot eat gluten. But when I'm not stressed out, give me all the bread. Like, I'll eat all the bread. So trauma can definitely manifest itself because your gut health is very much connected to your mental health, because your neurons are connected to your gut. And so if a young person, for children who can't necessarily talk about, oh, I feel anxiety or I feel depression, they're not going to have those words, but maybe they'll say, Mommy, Daddy, my stomach hurts. That's a way of saying, hey, something's wrong and it's not my stomach.
So there's people who have experienced hives, for example. They get hives and they're like, oh, it must be allergic reaction or something else. But sometimes it's a psychological impact that's happening and manifesting itself through their body, right? Okay, so how does one self-help, right? Self-help, okay, from trauma to transition. So tip 1, ways in which to help your journey. And it's okay to feel powerless and vulnerable. It's okay to feel this way. And just remind yourself that you are strong and you are able to cope through the situation. So that's tip number 1. Okay. Tip number 2, and I'm going to go through all the tips and then you guys can share a little bit on that. Tip number 2 is acknowledge or watch what your body is telling you, or what is it saying to you, as you just mentioned, those symptoms. So what you need to do, or what can be helpful, is to maybe do exercises or some kind of movement if your body is capable of doing it. Some people may not be able to move, or it depends on their physical situation. But this is just one of. It doesn't mean it's the tip that you need to use, but it is one of the things that you can do just to help. Now, from what I understand, it helps to release the endorphins in your body to improve your mood and your outlook. Okay. Tip number 3 is it's okay to ask for help. So it's okay to find someone that you can confide in and speak with. It's okay to have a therapist or to speak with a therapist or your church counselor. It doesn't matter, as long as you can trust somebody with your story, with your hurt, with your pain, whatever it is. You need to be able to speak to someone regarding it. And then tip number 4 is to take time for yourself, relax, meditate, pray, whatever it is that helps you get into a zone, as some people would say. Deep breathing helps as well. So those are 4 tips that that can help you transition from the trauma into a better headspace as well. Would you guys like to add one tip each or add to what I have said
I can
regarding?
add one.
Yeah.
I think so. In terms of if you're experiencing it in your body, so physically, one thing that I do is I take walks. I really love nature. I
Yes.
find nature to be extremely restorative. I say to my husband, I call it my all-inclusive vacation. um, so I take baths, I go for walks and stretching. Those things are very, very helpful. And in terms of the psychological impact, there are 2 things that I do in the morning. I practice gratitude every morning. So in my devotion, I will write 3 things I'm grateful for. And I will set my timer for 5 minutes or sometimes longer, and I'll just take 5 minutes of silence.
Good. And Cheyanne, what do you do?
I think for me, I think it's about finding my people and knowing that I can access my people. So, another way, and I think, Jess, you use the same language as me as well, since we're coming from the same perspective. But yeah, finding community is very important, because if you don't have that community, and it doesn't mean that you're going to, interact with them every single day or every single month. Maybe they won't hear from you for 2 years. That's okay. But just know who your allies are, because allyship is so important. But also understand that not everyone will think the same way as you. So how do you create safe space? But moving beyond a safe space, because safe space is just about talking about opinions, right? And just kind of like talking about your perspectives on what's happening, but it doesn't necessarily incorporate dialogue to really make it a transformative space. And so it's so important that you kind of move from a safe space to a brave space, because brave spaces, nurturing brave spaces, means that you're actually dialoguing and you're actually having a commitment. Each person around that group has a commitment to really make a change within that group, but also within ourselves, because at the end of the day, we have our own growth and capacity building that we need to do to really get from point A to point B as well. And point B is not the destination. Remember, it's an ongoing journey. It's just part of that journey. But in order to keep moving, you need to also, develop ways where you're interacting with other people, but also interacting with yourself with love. Self-love, self-compassion is so important for self-preservation. And that could look like anything, whether it's taking a nap. If you're always on the go, relax yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
I've been off of social media for 4 days now, and it's been amazing because we're so connected nowadays.
Yeah.
And I realized this until maybe a couple of years ago, that being on social media a lot, it actually impacted my ability to really go into myself and really focus on myself, because busy. Your mind is always busy. So think about who's your allyship, right?
Yeah.
Who's in your community. And think about what you yourself need to show yourself love, because you cannot always expect other people to pour that into you.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to figure out how we can pour that into ourselves, and that's a journey in itself as well.
Right. Excellent. So again, thank you, ladies, for coming on. I do appreciate everything that you've shared with me and the audience. It's great information, and I believe that someone has been impacted by your knowledge and your experience. I know I have, and I thank you so much, Cheyanne and Jessica. I thank you. And before we go, I just want to remind people our words are powerful. Our words bring life, and it can also bring death. We want to speak life to the people around us. Remember to respect people's feelings, respect their space, and love each other, because all we have is each other. I want us to remember that we are all special and that we are God's people. Now, before I mentioned that we're going to have a special announcement, and the announcement is that next week, Tuesday at 6 o'clock, we are going to have self-care therapeutic baking. So you don't want to miss it. It's going to be phenomenal. We'll have Monique Finlater and Alexia Daly joining us, and we are actually putting out there, if you want to be a part of the show next week, Tuesday, there will be a contest posted, so you can jump in on that contest and win and be on our program next week, Tuesday. You don't want to miss it. And today's quote is by Michelle Lorraine, me. So, if you understand that the trials and hurts has built calluses of strength, you will walk in power and fear no more. Have a good night. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week, Tuesday. Thank you.